Department of Education, and he doesn't understand why if she was not comfortable, she wouldn't have gone to another woman on his staff or to that person, to his secretary.
Jeanette, let's go back and briefly do a little chronology, because it was part of what Orrin Hatch was raging about, and you obviously can't see this on radio, but Orrin Hatch was literally raging. This committee first adjourned, and track me on this, Jeanette, on September 10th.
Right, Tuesday, September 10th.
Apparently on September 12th was when they received the affidavit from Anita Hill and knew all of this. Now, Biden says that it was Hill who said, please do not disclose this information. However, after the 7-7 vote, when they went to the full Senate, they did sit down and talk to Mitchell and to
the Republican. George Mitchell,
That's right.
In the Senate.
Right. And that the Republican and Democratic heads of the Senate knew about this report, and everyone was satisfied to read it and let it go before the leak. And part of what Hatch was saying was, if this committee had been more upfront to begin with, that we wouldn't be here today struggling with this issue of this affidavit and Anita Hill.
Now, in this morning's Washington Post, an unidentified administration official is quoted as saying that Republican senators in the White House last night were, quote, beside themselves with anger because of the process followed here in not having the witnesses' statements and full allegations made available to the White House and to the Republican side.
Now, there was an earlier report that said that they had, in fact, shown both the Republican and the Democratic head of the Senate these reports, and that they had concurred that it was best, always in order to protect the wishes of Hill, that this not be released. And I think it's important that the audience understand that Anita Hill is saying that she did not come forward with this report.
Yeah, and it does seem to me that the situation is frequently cast in terms of her having come forward, trying to derail the nomination. And it should be made clear she was very reluctant. As Nina Totenberg said, Hill would not even talk to her until she went to Hill and said, I've got the affidavit, so I need you to respond to it. You know, just a couple of days ago, Gail, Senator Biden, the chairman of this committee, was saying that he would use any delay in Senate action on the nomination of Judge Thomas to look into several allegations against the nominee. Those allegations had to do with something you mentioned earlier this morning about Judge Thomas is using government money to pay for a private trip. His treatment of an aide who apparently had criticized the EEOC and says that he was then transferred to the hinterlands for that, and relationship to South Africa. But it was very clear this morning that Senator Biden was saying, we're here to deal with the sexual harassment, and that's going to be the agenda of the day.
Okay. Jeanette, let's just go back a bit and talk about the fact that there really is, regardless of what Anita Hill now says, Judge Thomas, who was given the opportunity to speak first, there is really no room for discussion. Judge Thomas, as I understand it, is saying Anita Hill is lying. Everything she is saying is a lie.
That's right, and it'll be interesting to see if he chooses to exercise the option that he has requested from the committee, in which they've granted, to be able to speak again at the end, if he chooses to do that. Judge Thomas is still in the room during this recess. He is talking with his wife and with Senator Danforth. You know, in human terms, it's clearly a difficult situation for him, for his family, for Anita Hill. We can just look at the number of days it's taken for the second witness, Angela Wright, to come forward, because you know that once you do, you become embroiled in a situation that just spins out of control.
Now, if the affidavit, and the only thing we know about it is what you have read from Totenberg's report, there obviously, what Anita Hill said some of these conversations that went on were so explicit that you are not dealing here with the case of perhaps she misunderstood. So I'm not, those kinds of remarks you could not possibly have misunderstood. And Judge Thomas is saying that he cannot possibly think of any occasion or any words that he might have said to her that could have solicited this reaction of sexual harassment. On the other hand, she is making quite graphic sexual remarks that he supposedly said.
We should note that Professor Hill is by no means what one would call a liberal person. She's been characterized as conservative, and I don't use that in any pejorative sense, but this is a woman who was raised, she says, by very religious parents, who taught at Oral Roberts University, now of course is at the University of Oklahoma, whom I'm told is quite religious, and who probably has difficulty talking about sexual matters in public. So it's clearly not a situation that anybody, Judge Thomas, Anita Hill, or anyone else, would really want to find themselves in. But she says she resents the way she was treated by the committee, and it seems that she's really been willing to come forward finally only because, whereas she had been assured that her statement would be distributed and it would become not just part of the record, but something that would be seriously considered in this process, she came to feel that was not happening.
I think that Hill's position as a law professor at the University of Oklahoma makes this even more difficult for Judge Thomas, because in other cases of this nature, the press has been very quick when the woman involved was not the equal of the man involved to simply dismiss the woman as a bimbo of some type, out to misuse or some sort of a party girl. Here is a case where the credibility of both is very high, and this is going to be a very long and difficult day.
If you saw some of that press conference on Monday, I believe it was clear that she had the support. In fact, she was introduced, if I'm not mistaken, by the president of her university, a white man in Oklahoma, and there at the press conference were other faculty and students. I thought that press conference was the point, it was really the turning point. That when you heard the story on the radio, if you heard it, that was one thing. But when you saw her and saw that there was no glee, that she was speaking with some difficulty, that really became the turning point, and that's when her credibility went way up. Now, Hill, according to the Totenberg story, she said, Gail says that she started talking to the committee on the 12th of September, but it was not until September 20th that an FBI investigation was even suggested to her, and then she was not interviewed herself by the FBI until September 23rd. We remember now these hearings started on a Tuesday, and we're talking about it being a week and a half later before the FBI even begins to really get involved. So there is a question of why it took so long. She said that she was told by an FBI agent that she should expect that the Judiciary Committee would come back to her with more questions, but they never came back with any more. And I guess that's the point at which she begins to feel, well, this is not going anyplace. And I would note, too, Gail, that it's interesting to me, it seems all the senators have really, or the senators who have spoken, are being very careful to say sexual harassment is a serious charge. Senator Strom Thurmond made it a real point to do that. He's clearly been a supporter of Judge Thomas. Judge Thomas in his statement even said sexual harassment is a serious charge. And so it seems clear that they're wanting to be very careful to align themselves properly with respect to women.
Yes, because obviously it's not only Judge Thomas and Anita Hill that are on the hot seat here. It's also the Judiciary Committee and the Senate. They certainly didn't expect 1,000 calls per day, as one senator was getting from women complaining of sexual harassment, and they have certainly felt that they have been caught with egg on their face with an issue that they were, at least it appears, were potentially willing to ignore. And so, yes, they want to definitely position themselves as being, all of them, certainly being opposed to sexual harassment. If you remember very early, Jeanette, when the White House first made some statements on this, at first the White House statements were a little testy, as though, critical of Hill and kind of trying to dismiss this whole allegation. But by the end of the day on Monday, they had totally turned around from that position and were saying, yes, the president is very concerned about the issue of sexual harassment.
And you could really, on Tuesday, especially if you were watching C-SPAN or paying attention to the news, you could see things shifting. Even after Hill's press conference on Monday, they were still saying, we're having this vote on Tuesday. It's happening at 6 o'clock. That's the deal. As the phone calls started coming in and the outrage bubbled up, and there were so many columns on this one issue, little by little, the Senate started turning around. It appears that Judge Thomas is re-entering the room.
He's leaving.
Is leaving the room. He had been here in the room, but he's now leaving. The committee is still out, and we're not sure what that means. If it means it's going to be a longer break. What Senator Hatch had suggested, and what I don't remember now, it was either Senator Biden or Senator Kennedy was objecting to, was a recess. Senator Biden is clearly wanting to move along, and Senator Hatch is clearly not going to let that happen without some more discussion of and movement on this matter of getting Anita Hill's affidavit into the public record.
Jeanette, I'm sorry, we're having a little microphone problem here, and it just almost fell in my lap, but we're going to straighten that out. Jeanette, one of Judge Clarence Thomas' supporters is a woman whose name is Levita Coleman, who is, I think, herself an attorney here in Washington, D.C. One of the issues that Hill made was this conversation with Judge Thomas about pornographic movies. Even though Coleman is a staunch supporter of Judge Thomas, and in fact said that she certainly didn't feel that Judge Clarence Thomas would harass anyone, she did make some statement about this pornographic movie business. Apparently, she too was at Yale Law School, and she said that Judge Thomas had often been a patron of X-rated movie houses while a student at Yale Law School in the early 70s, where she too was a student, and at least once humorously described an X-rated film to me and other colleagues, quote. But she said that, it was an amusing account, and she certainly wasn't offended, but she seems to confirm that at least while in college, Judge Thomas did see pornographic movies. I think that part of the issue here, Jeanette now says apparently part of this delay is the committee is discussing whether or not they're going to bring Hill into the room. It hasn't happened yet, but we will certainly stop this discussion as soon as we see her.
It looks like they are going to be bringing her in now. That's what the discussion is about. If we sound like we're not sure about things, it's because we're not.
Because we're not,
and
they're
because
not.
the committee is not, and I think to some extent they're making it up as they go along.
But let's talk a little bit about the differences between what Judge Thomas has said and what we anticipate Hill saying. A couple of places. One issue will be, Jeanette, there's someone frantically waving at you, and they're saying that Hill is on her way.
That's right, that she's out in the hall and she'll be coming in shortly.
Okay. Where there seems to be big discrepancies in what was said. One issue is really going to be around these supposed 10 telephone calls. Obviously, Hill said that she was made to feel very uncomfortable and humiliated by Judge Thomas. On the other hand, Republicans are pointing out that this is certainly not the actions of someone who would then turn around, not the feelings of someone who would then turn around and make 10 telephone calls and continue some sort of relationship. She is saying that she, in fact, never made calls to Judge Thomas. And, Jeanette, if I'm not mistaken, in his testimony this morning, Judge Thomas alluded to the fact that they had had a friendly relationship in the past 10 years and that she had called him frequently. She's saying that she never called him at all except to return his telephone calls.
Just, we might, well, actually what we should do now is let our listeners know that the committee is filing back into the room. Looks like it's still going to be a little bit. Senator Biden is not in yet. For those of you who've not heard any of the specifics of this second woman, as she's being called, Angela Wright is her name. She is now an editor at a newspaper in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was a press aide to Clarence Thomas at EEOC, who was fired by him. And I heard, I believe it was Senator Hatch, has said that he has evidence that she was fired from 2 other places, and apparently is wants to use that. We don't know whether that is true or is not true, but apparently wants to use that to point out that perhaps she is not a credible witness. Wright, though, says that Thomas repeatedly asked her to date him, telling her, quote, "You will be going out with me," unquote, or talking about, quote, "when I get around to dating you," unquote. On one occasion, she said, Thomas complimented her on her appearance and then asked, "What size are your breasts?" Wright said she changed the subject. And I think one thing that it may be that's a little sticky here is that it's real easy when you're not in the situation to say, well, why didn't that person just A, quit the job, or B, tell the person to bug off? That's much more easily said than done. The committee is now coming back to recess. We will be hearing from Senator Joseph Biden, the chairman.
WBAI, New York.
The hearing will come to order. The committee has met and resolved the impasse in the following way. Professor Hill indicated on the telephone that she was prepared to have her statement released. And in further discussion with the committee and others involved, it has been determined that we will excuse temporarily Judge Thomas, and we will call momentarily as the witness Anita Hill. Anita Hill will be sworn and make her own statement in her own words, at which time we would then begin the questioning of Professor Hill, after which we will bring back Judge Thomas for questioning. Now the committee will stand in recess until, and I imagine it's only momentarily, as a professor will be here momentarily, but we'll stand in recess until she is able to take her seat, which should be a matter of a minute or so. I'm told security is clearing the hall. She's in the hall so that she can come down.
These are the point scale at which I wish we had a phone book so we could just read it to sort of fill the time, because we keep having these unanticipated. You don't have a phone book in your purse, do you?
You'll have to bear with us. Some of our equipment is starting to fail. Jeanette,
that's why we need you to call 1-800-243-2200 and make that pledge to Pacifica. Okay, Gail.
And so Jeanette and I are trying to share a microphone.
You're listening to coverage of the Clarence Thomas hearings here over Pacifica Radio New York, WBAI 99.5 FM.
Why don't you simply
community radio here in New York.
She just simply quit the job. Well, there is a possibility that a witness, one of the witnesses, even though we have no witness list, that will be called later this afternoon, will be someone from the Department of Education who will say that there was no fear of Hill losing her job at the Department of Education. Hill has said that she followed Clarence Thomas because she needed the job and that she thought the harassment had stopped. But that could be potentially damaging to Hill's testimony.
Well, if I understood correctly this morning, Judge Thomas said that she was a career employee, and as one who did my nearly 3 years as a secretary in the government many years ago and nearly attained career status. Career status simply means that you sort of have the right, now it may be different now, but that you had the right to hold on to a job. So he said that she actually had the option of staying at the Department of Education and chose to move with him.
Another point will be whether or not Judge Thomas ever asked Anita Hill out on a date. There seems to be some confusion there. He said this morning that he never even asked her out. Am I correct? And
That's right. He said that contrary to some reports in the press, he told the FBI that he had never asked her out. And there have been reports that, well, he asked her out, but then when she said no, it sort of went away.
But supposedly, and we don't know, again, I must emphasize we haven't seen this report, that when Judge Thomas talked to the FBI, that he said that he had in fact asked Hill to go out with him, but when she declined, he said he dropped the matter, and that supposedly is a quote from Judge Thomas's statement to the FBI, which we, of course, have not seen. How do you think, Jeanette, that Anita Hill is going to stand up under all this? Since she arrived in Washington, she seems very shaky to me. Her voice was trembling. Is she up to this?
I don't have a clue, Gail. This is one of those questions people ask you like you're supposed to have.
Is tension mounting?
It certainly is. As this recess gets longer, the tension is definitely mounting. I was observing her the other day. I watched all of the press conference the other day and, was really looking at it from the standpoint of somebody who works in broadcast journalism. I thought that she was a strong witness or made a strong showing for herself in that she didn't back down. But she is not someone who has a real assertive manner and, that deep voice and is ready to go out there and do battle. And in fact, I thought that stood her in good stead. I thought it made it, the fact that this was difficult for her made her even more believable in a way, because as I said earlier this morning, unless one is completely emotionally unbalanced, and I don't know her, so I don't rule out that possibility, but unless one is, why would you subject yourself to this sort of thing? It's going to be tough on her, I think, but they're going to clearly, this committee is very aware of what they look like. There are 14 white men sitting here in this large white marble room that we were in those many days before, and she is a 35 or so-ish law professor, black woman, Yale graduate, not someone to be taken lightly, but also not somebody to be pushed about. They will look bad if they appear to be pushing her about.
And talking about the committee and who are the standouts of this committee, and if you will notice that Senator Kennedy has been particularly quiet. It hasn't been the Kennedy of past hearings, and obviously that has to do with the senator feeling he must take a low profile because we're hesitating because the door is opening and we are looking to see if Hill is coming into the room. But the fact being that the senator has to take a low profile in view of the Palm Beach incident. And so Senator Kennedy, who would usually be a standout along with Simpson and Hatch here, has been very quiet. And one of the few things that Senator Kennedy said was said from the floor earlier in the week, in which he said, anyone who paid attention to Judge Thomas's prior stereotype statements on women and work can see at a glance that his record raises serious questions about his sensitivity to discrimination against women in the workplace. And that's been kind of the extent to what Senator Kennedy has said. Simpson, on the other hand, has really been kind of the bulldog. If I was Anita Hill, I would not want to meet Senator Simpson today. But and here's something that Simpson made that maybe was said that we could maybe talk about for a second. Simpson said, Anita Hill will be sucked right into the very thing she wanted to most avoid. She will be injured and destroyed and belittled and hounded and harassed. Then he said, real harassment, different than the sexual kind.
You know, this is one of the few occasions where I think it is not hyperbole to say that tension is mounting. If you were in this room now, you would see that not only is it packed, but literally every face is turned towards the door. The Capitol Police are there, and if you were with us at the very beginning, you heard Senator Biden instruct the Capitol Police to stand at that door and not let anyone enter or exit during the time that Judge Thomas was speaking. We were hoping that wasn't going to be too long, because there's sometimes reasons we won't go into why one needs to leave the room. But we can pretty much expect that it's going to be a similar situation here, and I mean, really everyone is sitting with bated breath waiting. She must be in the halls making her way through. The policemen are really on guard, and some of the women who came over from the House side, the members of Congress, the women members of Congress, Democrats who came over, are standing, waiting. Anita Hill should be here at any moment. And in the meantime, we're going to try to give you some insight and keep you with us. Want to remind you, you are listening to Pacifica Radio, carrying live gavel-to-gavel coverage of these hearings, and remind you just again that it was not easy to mount this effort on very short notice, but we know it is what you expect, it's what you deserve, and we ask your support. The number is 1-800-243-2200, 1-800-243-2200, and say that you want to contribute to Pacifica Radio. We really need you folks. I mean, it's times like this that you can really see the need for Pacifica Radio.
There are some premiums, and it's in this mess on the table. If we could find them, I'd be happy to talk to you about what they are.
Just want to remind you that you are listening on these on this station to WBAI. This is WBAI 99.5 FM, commercial-free, listener-supported radio here. And you're listening again to a live coverage of these Clarence Thomas hearings, nomination to the Supreme Court. If you haven't fulfilled your pledge to this Pacifica radio station, WBAI, your local Pacifica radio station here, please do so by writing P.O. Box 1243, Church Street Station, New York, New York, 10277. That's P.O. Box 12345, Church Street Station, New York, New York, 10277. Also, we have a toll-free number here if you wish to support WBAI. 1-800-828-1700. 1-800-828-1700. We depend upon you for our support because we are listener-supported community radio. We are responsive to you. 1-800-828-1700. That's our number, WBAI's number, to pledge your support. So please support WBAI here and support WBAI and call 1-800-828-1700. Again, you're listening to live coverage of the Clarence Thomas hearings. Coming up very shortly will be the testimony of Professor Anita F. Hill at these Clarence Thomas hearings. This is WBAI 99.5 FM, New York. We go back down to Washington with our Pacifica correspondents.
$100 pledge, you receive something even more than that, but whatever it is, I seem not to be able to find it. I'm sorry.
While you're finding it, Gail, while you're finding it, Gail, let me say that a group of women have just entered the room. They are apparently supporters of Professor Hill, who has also just come in. Will be seated briefly. There's a group of about 6 people, 2 men, 4 women who are sitting behind her. A number of other people. We don't know, of course, who they are at this point, but they're sitting.
We also remind listeners out here that the program Natural Living with Gary Knoll and most of our regularly scheduled programming for this afternoon will not be aired. WBAI.
And others are being seated. In a moment, I will ask you to stand to be sworn, at which time, when that is finished, we will invite you to make any statement that you wish to make. And then what we will do is I will begin by asking you some questions, and then Senator Specter will ask you some questions, and then Senator Leahy will ask you some questions, and then I assume it will be Senator Specter again, but I am not certain of that. We'll ask you questions. And again, welcome. We're happy that you are here, and let us stand and be sworn, if you will. Professor, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Professor Hill, please make whatever statement you would wish to make to the committee.
Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, friend. I instruct the officers, do not let anyone in or out of that door while Professor Hill is making her statement.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Thurmond, members of the committee, my name is Anita F. Hill, and I am a professor of law at the University of Oklahoma. I was born on a farm in Okmulgee County, Oklahoma in 1956. I am the youngest of 13 children. I had my early education in Okmulgee County. My father, Albert Hill, is a farmer in that area. My mother's name is Irma Hill. She is also a farmer and a housewife. My childhood was one of a lot of hard work and not much money, but it was one of solid family affection as represented by my parents. I was reared in a religious atmosphere in the Baptist faith, and I have been a member of the Antioch Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma since 1983. It is a very warm part of my life at the present time. For my undergraduate work, I went to Oklahoma State University and graduated from there in 1977. I am attaching to this statement a copy of my resume for further details of my education. Thank you. I graduated from the university with academic honors and proceeded to the Yale Law School, where I received my JD degree in 1980. Upon graduation from law school, I became a practicing lawyer with the Washington, D.C. firm of Wald, Harkrader, and Ross. In 1981, I was introduced to now Judge Thomas by a mutual friend. Judge Thomas told me that he was anticipating a political appointment, and he asked if I would be interested in working with him. He was, in fact, appointed as Assistant Secretary of Education for Civil Rights. After he had taken that post, he asked if I would become his assistant, and I accepted that position. In my early period there, I had 2 major projects. The first was an article I wrote for Judge Thomas's signature on the education of minority students. The second was the organization of a seminar on high-risk students, which was abandoned because Judge Thomas transferred to the EEOC, where he became the chairman of that office. During this period at the Department of Education, my working relationship with Judge Thomas was positive. I had a good deal of responsibility and independence. I thought he respected my work and that he trusted my judgment. After approximately 3 months of working there, he asked me to go out socially with him. What happened next and telling the world about it are the two most difficult experiences of my life. It is only after a great deal of agonizing consideration and great number of sleepless nights that I am able to talk of these unpleasant matters to anyone